Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity, inclusion and belonging and help them shed a light on why this really matters to leaders by inspiring, educating and motivating others. I'm joined today by Jahanzaib Ansari. He's on a mission to defeat unconscious bias and increase diversity in the workforce. He's got a really fascinating story and the team and I have been very fortunate to discover some of the great work that he has been doing. He's a co-founder and CEO of Knockri, an AI skills assessment tool. They are leaders in HR technology, and he's often invited to share his thoughts on AI, the future of work, unconscious bias, and diversity at major events. Welcome to the show, Jahanzaib.
Thank you so much, Layla. Really excited to be on this show.
Thanks so much for joining us. And you're based in Canada, aren't you?
Yes, I'm based in Canada, Toronto, and it's great weather here right now. It's a little different climate from the south of the border, but otherwise, we're all making the best of these uncertain times, and just trying to enjoy what we have the last remaining days of the summer.
Absolutely. And I should ask first and foremost, really, how are you? Because we are still in its midst, of course, of a pandemic, and I think it's affecting everyone in very, very different ways. So I should check in and see how you, the family and your teams are doing.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, you know what? We've being a technology startup, we've adjusted pretty well from working from home. But obviously there was a period of adjustment that all of us, the entire developer team, the IO psychologists, and even us and the founders had to go through, change up a little bit of our management style as well, and really focusing on mental health. And this is something that I feel has even been highlighted further because we're continuously working, we're at home. It gets very difficult to often separate work from home and home from work. And so really making time with ourselves now and really prioritizing that as well.
Absolutely. And I wonder, for those of our listeners who are tuning in today, whether you would be so kind as to perhaps give us a little insight into your story. How did you come to be where you are today? And you have such a fascinating name and a unique name. I'd love to perhaps learn a little bit about your background and heritage.
Absolutely. So Knockri is actually, it means the word job to about 1 billion people in the world. So in the languages of Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi, it means the word job. And I'm from Pakistan originally. And so when we were starting off, we were looking at, several play on words, and we said Knockri can be knocking on the door of opportunity, and also to us it means the word job. So it was a double play over there that we thought was pretty neat, actually. And Layla, how we got started was super interesting because about four and a half years ago, I myself was applying to jobs, and that I have a long ethnic name, which is Jahanzaib, and I wouldn't hear back from employers. And so being broke, I didn't, I had to do whatever it takes to get a job. So my co-founder now, Maz, he's like, why don't you just anglicize it? And we went from a variation of Jason, Jordan, Jacob, and within 4 to 6 weeks, I got a job. And, while at that time I had no other choice because I needed employment. But we felt that on a yearly basis, there's so many people that are being overlooked unfairly because of so many different biases, and that there has to be a better solution. And that's when we got together with a machine learning scientist and an IO psychologist to create Knockri, which is basically an AI-based skills assessment tool that reduces bias and shortlists the best fit talent for a hiring manager to interview.
Fantastic. What a brilliant story. I love that. And of course, for me personally, I'm sure many others who are listening in today, this resonates a huge amount. My background, as you may know, is in exec search, and one of the real things that made me so interested in diversity and inclusion and belonging is that I was seeing this huge disparity in terms of individuals at those lofty senior positions who perhaps came from very different or culturally, ethnic, or even gender diverse backgrounds, and kind of wondered really why that is. And it seems to me, if the pipeline at that bottom end or wherever it might be is, being pushed a certain way, or if there is certain biases that are held, perhaps that is one of the many factors as to why there is not senior individuals or more senior individuals who come from that diverse range of backgrounds.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a huge point, actually. And we noticed this with a lot of the customers because when it comes to even sourcing talent, I'm just saying, forget about screening talent. When it comes to sourcing talent, if an organization is trying to source from that same pool and expect a different result, it's extremely difficult. And so when there aren't any minority representation that is moving up in the leadership, it's also very hard to hire and also retain diverse talent as well. And so, a lot of the organizations that we also speak with is some of them are just looking for a band-aid solution and say, hey, listen, can you help us fill our quota? And the thing is that we can't hire just based on tokenism to fill someone's quota, because what happens is that when that person does get hired there and the environment is not inclusive, or they don't feel a sense of belonging there, that talent ends up churning. And so this is obviously a huge component, and even being able to increase gender and racial diversity at the top of the funnel is very multifaceted, as you know. You're definitely an expert in this space, and there's so many different areas where there is training that is required for us to retain that talent, and then obviously be able to grow that talent into senior level roles.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And I must ask, if you don't mind me dipping back into your background, because I know there'll be a number of people who are listening who maybe are thinking to themselves, hey, I wonder whether that's why I didn't necessarily get chosen for that role when I've got the skill set, etc. How did it make you feel when you were being bounced back for these positions, and then when you saw that major change from your current ethnic name and putting in the more westernized, anglicized name? How did you feel at that point?
Well, firstly, I felt extremely betrayed, because I felt that, growing up in Canada, living in Canada, I wasn't any much different than anyone else with an anglicized name. And I felt that, having my name associated, in the back of a recruiter's head could actually mean that A, I'm not a good performing talent, or B, that my skills aren't up to par with somebody whose name might be a John, or who might be a David. And I felt that was extremely unfair, and it's just not myself. Then I thought about I felt that there's so many other people that are probably going through this, and that someone has to take care of it. And that's how this came together, on on a mission to empower, the world with fair and equal opportunity. And this like resonates, in Knockri, and how we've like built out the product, and how we've structured the assessments, and in the results that the customers have seen, right? Like for example, we've been able to increase gender and racial diversity in shortlist of candidates by up to 25%. And Knockri is being used by customers such as IBM on a global level, Novartis, Education First. So, us just really like hustling and like, building out a product, like it was definitely very challenging. And it still is, but I just feel that as a founder, if you're on the right mission and are truly in it to like provide value, you can make a difference to the world. And that's, I think, like what, my whole journey has taught me, is I felt that I was given that problem, so, we can solve it on a much larger level, basically.
Mm-hmm. I'm so thrilled. This is such a brilliant success story. And to be honest with you, I am not surprised that you've been featured across so many different journals. Jahanzaib, I've seen a lot of your stuff with a lot of the well-known publications, HuffPost and what have you, but then also being appointed as, I think it was an award for HRD magazine, and then you were appointed as member to the World Economic Forum, so Equality and Inclusion Council. So it's great to see that you are seeing this recognition there from all of your hard work, and that it's truly paid off and is genuinely making a difference.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, just just being able to get that recognition, it definitely helps like support our mission, and like really like makes us feel that we are doing something right. I mean, with the World Economic Forum, I think that was a highlight, and just being able to work with other chief diversity officers on crafting a like toolkit that would be looked at by the world on best practices. And I think like, even for me to imagine 4.5 years ago, when I was like running around like broke without a job, that this could be even like possible. It still like stuns me at times when I think about it, but I think it's but I'm extremely like grateful for for the ability to solve this like problem, and the opportunities I've been given so far.
Jahanzaib, I love how humble you are about this. And I must ask, you starting this business, was that a product of what actually then happened, i.e., couldn't find a corporate role and you decided to start this organization?
No, so what ended up happening is that I got a job with a consulting firm. And so like right after I changed my name, I got a job at a consulting firm, and I was sitting at that company, and they had D&I training at that time. And so I'm sitting down and I'm like seeing these stock images of like multicolored hands, and some more multicolored hands just holding up the globe, and some more multicolored hands. I'm just like, I had to change my name just to get a job here. I mean, this is complete like rubbish. And that, I think that was like one of the catalysts that made me feel that some of the organizations, especially a couple of years ago, were just having D&I training just so they could click a, or like take a checkbox. And it wasn't like the reality of how the organization was operating. And I just said, like, we have to take a stance on this. And so yeah, that was one of the catalysts. So then we got started, and we created out a product, and it was extremely difficult initially, like going to a large organization such as IBM and saying, hey, like we can help you in all these areas, as a 4-person team. And so, really able to show the organization like value, and drive these changes in a form of a pilot initially, and like proving out that pilot, and then getting the entire leadership team on board was, very like fruitful for us. So extremely difficult in the beginning, but now I'm extremely grateful. We've raised $3 million a couple of months ago just to further, fuel our growth now.
I am so glad that you told that story. I was really hoping that you would. And you said it far more articulately than I would have, that it was rubbish, quote unquote. What absolute, rubbish it is when we see organizations paying a significant amount of lip service to things that don't actually come out of the roots, the branches, the leaves of the organization and the culture. And I will share very quickly here, if I may, is mine was perhaps the other way around. So I was adopted by white British parents who were wonderful, and I am Chinese, can't speak Chinese, but I'm Chinese. My name, Mackenzie, very Scottish. For those in the UK, very, very Scottish. Probably wouldn't know that I was Chinese, and often I've turned up to a meeting and people have wondered, where's Layla Mackenzie? No, it's me, it's the Scottish name, and what have you. And I did well at university and applied to all the graduate training roles. My CV got me through the door for every single one of those. I won't mention the companies here, but all of the big graduate programs you could possibly imagine, I got through the door with the CV. I got a first-class honours degree. I could not get one of those jobs, not one of them. And I wonder, having looked back, look, I'm not the brightest person in the world. I'm dyslexic. I'm not the brightest person in the world, but I know that I'm good at what I do, like you are. And, you want to know that you can be yourself and bring those skill sets to the table and be your true self, which is ultimately what you were not then doing in that organization, being in there with a different name and trying to behave a certain way to conform, to be accepted. And then you see this, perhaps lip service being paid to something that, that would really anger me. I think it's just so, it's so fascinating to see how the world is starting to change in positive ways, and that the skill sets and the differences are really starting to be embraced within certain organizations to make change for the better. Because look, Jahanzaib, I clearly don't need to tell you why we need to be making organizations more diverse. And as you said, not just a tick box exercise, but doing this for the right reasons and because it makes absolute commercial sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's a huge point. I mean, I'm gonna like tell you something that we have analyzed is that it's not even that Layla, that it's not even just hiring bias within the job interview. And it's really unfortunate about what happened with you as well, because it makes, like, it would be terrible to just walk in and then trying to hide a confused face because of your name, and you look something else, right? Like that was like, I'm appalled by that. And so with myself, very like similarly, when I got the job and they asked me for identification, and they saw Jason on my resume and like Jahanzaib on my license, they're like, oh, like, wait, is this the same person, right? So it's like, I'm like really appalled by these situations. And what I wanted to share is that even the way that assessments have been designed for the past 40, 50 years, even that was causing a lot of adverse impact or like disparate impact, as it's also known as well. Like from the data that we've seen is that the like a cognitive ability assessment that was initially like built out to test out a like gifted student in like grade 3, and that has, you know, further been adopted to organizations assessing talent. In the US, African Americans and folks of Latin backgrounds have known to score one standard deviation lower than somebody who is even a South Asian like male like myself, or just a like Caucasian male. And it's because of the fact that there's been so much segregation for like decades. And so a lot of the knowledge gap that a certain class has, the others like didn't for the longest time. So I'm saying just by default of having a cognitive assessment like that up front is not allowing these people a fair shot just to even apply to that job. And so like really, I feel that you know, COVID has obviously accelerated, you know, video technology and, you know, video within HR, but at that same time, it's really further highlighted, you know, these systemic, you know, bias in hiring practices as well. And, you know, what we can do as like people to make sure that from every step of the recruiting funnel can be assessed and, you know, and be audited. And this like starts from like sourcing to screening to onboarding, and then obviously providing them with training, because not one solution is not a silver bullet. And so it's a very multifaceted approach that we need to take and to like really ensure that we're nipping it in the butt in every aspect.
Mm-hmm. You quoted one of my favorite expressions, which is there is no one silver bullet. There is no one easy solution. And trying to fit this into a neat little box and presuming that one thing will solve this problem overnight when issues are systemic and, you know, been developing over so many years is absolutely, well, it's absolutely impossible, frankly. And so at risk of saying I concur yet again, which I totally do, there are so many different things. And I look at, you know, just as an example, because my background is exec search, and, you know, and so the recruitment process I'm very, very, very familiar with, as I should be. And we often get called upon to hire diverse, in inverted commas. And I say, well, exactly what do you mean by diverse? And when you say you want to hire diverse, please don't presume that this must be someone who is Black or Chinese or female or whatever that might be. And also look at how you are going to onboard that person within the organization. Because if you're not going to invest in helping to ensure that they do feel like they belong and helping that they do feel that they are in a safe place and that they can flourish and be themselves, you're going to end up then with organ rejection. That person will leave and you'll be back to square one. And then I've seen, you know, boardrooms and execs and say, oh, well, we tried to hire diverse and it didn't work. So we're going back to hiring our usual suspects from the same pools. And it is, you know, it's quite frustrating sometimes because, like you say, it's making sure they're onboarded properly. It's making sure that, you know, all of these different facets pre-interview, during the interview, are all looked at in their individuality.
Absolutely. And that's such a huge point. That is such a huge point. And I think there's so many similarities. You know, when you take a look at that and you just like take a look at, you know, organizations that aren't necessarily looking at, you know, performance and are just bringing in talent to fill out like their diversity quotas. Because like what happens is that, you know, what we saw, Layla, with, you know, some of the companies that we're working with is that if you are able to show an organization that, hey, listen, we're not just creating a more fairer hiring process, which is enabling for you to be able to hire like more diverse candidates, but also proving out after doing a longitudinal study and proving out their post-hire performance and showing them that, hey, listen, first of all, this talent is more like diverse and it's better performing as well. So it's helping your bottom line, and it's the people that you've been missing out on just because of a broken hiring system. And I think as if we're able to show organizations like this and create that feedback loop, then it really gets them to understand it to like the next level. I mean, and the thing is that we shouldn't have to do this. Unfortunately, it's something that is, convincing them a lot more. So that's what we've seen.
I'm a big believer in goals and metrics, because I think, as the age-old adage goes, if it doesn't get measured, then it doesn't get managed. And you can clearly see, you quoted 25% previously, which is just a phenomenal figure to grow to in terms of improving diversity. I think sometimes the word, and I'd love to know your thoughts here, is what do you think of the word quota? Because I think that word quota, certainly in the UK, I don't know, it's got kind of a slightly icky feeling, quota.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the word quota. I mean, because what happens is that then you're trying to just hit a metric for the sake of the metric. And so we don't want to do that, because as I was talking about, any of the organizations that have a quota, okay, if they do not have an internal process that's going to keep diverse talent, and if it's not inclusionary within that organization, and if it's just for sound bites, it becomes extremely difficult for you to continuously meet that quota. What's better is that if you can, I get the fact that you have to increase diversity within candidates, but you're assessing candidates or hiring them not based on tokenism, but actually having tools in place that helps you give everybody a fair and equal shot, and helps you surface a lot more diverse candidates that you might be missing out. And then on top of that, you also have programs within the company that make the talent feel like that they belong there, and they're really a part of that organization. Because I truly feel that the best referral is from an employee who loves the company. And so if you're hiring diverse candidates and it's an inclusive environment and they love the company, they're going to go out and tell their buddies about it. They're going to go and tell their friends about it, and that dramatically increases your talent pool then.
Indeed. And just to revert back to something you mentioned before around shifting to remote hiring within this COVID-19 pandemic, I wonder, what are your thoughts about the future, given everything that has happened with COVID? Now, I know obviously this is, terrible, terrible pandemic, but I have recently wondered to myself whether this will open the floodgates for a whole new wave of opportunity, given that people are now much more comfortable with working at home and working remotely. Could this allow organizations to be hiring and improving social mobility by looking at individuals that aren't necessarily on the doorstep of the headquarters?
That's a great point. And you know what? We're actually seeing that with several of the companies. As COVID has definitely accelerated you know, the acceptance of remote work. And so for organizations that are looking for like top talent, some of them are no longer just looking locally, and they're looking, you know, pretty much like globally. And so if talent is within a similar time zone and they can manage that team, they're really like building out distributed teams. And it's providing an opportunity to not just not just people within the country, but everyone out there. And it's really in a, in a sense, it can potentially equalize that level playing field, and provide access to opportunity to somebody who's sitting in like Bolivia, or somebody who's in Brazil, or somebody who's in a part of Africa. And I think that's a fantastic thing that can come out of this.
I think this is excellent, because the excuses, which I'm sure you and our listeners have heard before, are starting to now get smaller and diminish, because the whole, yes, but we can't find diverse candidates because they aren't in the right region and all these kind of things. It's like, well, hey, we're now comfortable and proved that remote working can work. And so there is no excuse for looking outside of the usual suspects and looking at people who have come from areas that might not be able to necessarily afford to live in the big cities or wherever they're living. I think it is exciting times. And, I just really hope, and I'm so pleased to hear that your business is flourishing, but for all of the right reasons. This is a business that has purpose. It's clearly got a huge amount of passion behind it, and it's changing the world for the good. So before we wrap up for today, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick lightning round questions. And
sure,
we normally give about 30 seconds to answer each, but I'm sure if you go over a little bit, we won't tell you off. First and foremost, because this means different things to different people, what does diversity and inclusion actually mean to you personally?
Several things. Number one is that being able to be your like true self when you like come into work, or just being accepted as your true self in any situation. And that is what diversity and inclusion like means to me. So regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, any of those things, is being able to be your genuine self and being accepted into any situation. That's how I see diversity and inclusion.
That's a great answer. And how about your secret to success? I know it's a slightly twee question, but clearly you've talked about having nothing to now having, multi-million pound investment, which you must be very pleased about. To many, this is a very successful company, an individual. What's the secret, if there is one?
You know what? That's a tough question, but I'd say number one is like discipline, obviously. But number two, I would say, honestly, would just be like consistency. I say, if you show up and you do the job on a day-to-day like basis, and you can move the needle, even if you like were to improve like 2% on a weekly basis, and just keep that up for years and years, you will outperform everybody. And so I would say is discipline and like consistency.
Any advice that you would give to your younger self, if you could?
A lot of advice. I would say, follow your passions, follow your dreams a lot more. Take some time off and like relax. The last 4.5 years, I've probably worked 7 days a week. And so I think, even having like a day or two off on the weekend is extremely helpful. It's really helpful in the long run. And, you know, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So you have to take care of yourself. And I say, you know, I would definitely give that advice to myself if I were to really think about it.
Real wise words. Thank you so much, Jahanzaib. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I know for a fact that our listeners will have got a huge amount out of hearing the story, but also hopefully a number of those points from you so kindly sharing have really resonated with them. For me, some of the key learning points have absolutely been around the fact that we must keep our foot on the gas. You mentioned there at the end, consistency. I think that's also incredibly applicable to organizations who are, you know, perhaps faced with these challenges at the moment, thinking, oh, how do we diversify? How do we look at other things? You know, at the moment, diversity, inclusion, and belonging is not something that will ever be done. It's something that we must absolutely keep our foot on the gas with all the time. You know, to really not only, as you said, you know, to look at creating a boardroom and organizations where the playing field is far more balanced, but also because it's a huge business benefit to business and wider society. And, you know, it's really positively affecting that whole corporate social responsibility piece in addition. So thank you so much. And, you know, I'd massively encourage everyone to get in touch with you and to get in touch with the organization at Knockri.com.
Thank you so much, Layla. I really appreciate it. And, you know, looking forward to staying in touch. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much. My name is Layla Mackenzie Dallas, and you've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show brought to you by Dial Global. We've been joined today by the fantastic Jahanzaib Ansari, the co-founder and CEO of Knockri.com. We're going to put all of the show notes and the key learning points into the show notes at the end of today's show, along with links and LinkedIn profile links so that you can get in touch. And we'll look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Visit www.dialglobal.org/podcast. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.